We're going to discuss with Jerry Gidel the crop conditions in the United States and all the market effects of the low level of the Mississippi River right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, it's been quite a week in the markets, right?
Oh, definitely. We came in after a 3-day weekend. It's always interesting as to how the markets react. Actually, uh, it, we had actually kind of firmed a little bit at the last minute on soybeans going into the 3-day weekend, but corn and wheat were pretty docile in that, and they, generally speaking, kind of stayed there, despite the fact that we ended up having some interesting set of crop conditions that came out on Tuesday night there. They kind of followed through a little bit on corn and soybeans, but then by the close on Wednesday, we were still, oh no, the crop reports coming, things like that. Geez, we took 3% out of the good and excellent, and we took beans down 5%, actually to the lowest level since we had way back in June on U.S. crop conditions. And that, I think the interesting thing about it is that this year's soybean crop is really turned dramatically in color, and that's how the producer out there knows that things are moving towards harvest. And with the heat and limited moisture over the last 3-4 weeks, and boy, there's some pretty dramatic indications of 50% or less on moisture here in the last 30 days, maybe stretches back even as much as 45 days here, all the way through most of August. And that does make a difference. And particularly, everybody knows that August is the month that helps determine soybean yields. So in that regard, we had some early reactions, but right now everybody's gun shy. And I am a little tentative myself that the USDA is going to go ahead and make some significant reductions, further reductions from what they've already done at this point, primarily because the fact that the set of things that they look at in the first set of field reports don't really involve looking at bushels. They look at how many plants we have out there in corn being planted, how many ears might be there. And then in the soybeans, it's the same situation. Look at how many plants might be in a 3x3 set of area out there to make some judgments as to how much yield we'll have, primarily because the fact that we're still in such maturity situations and that things could slip away here, particularly if this dryness continues. Now, it's kind of weird. Right now, today, we're back in the 70s after being 94, 95 degrees for 3 straight days over the holiday, and that, which is 15 degrees above normal for us at this time of year. And now we're 10 degrees below. But the twist of it is that we had a similar set of heat earlier in August, and then we didn't have a significant amount of rain occur when the heat subsided. Usually what happens is some set of cold temperatures come in from the northwest, and they hit a big high pressure zone, and it creates a lot of rain and things like that. And the last time we had this thing, it didn't really happen. Same time this time, what seemed to happen is the heat kind of then receded back to the southwest, and it kind of a glancing blow here. And then, interestingly enough, you just mentioned here that you're having some rain activity. I think that what's happened this week's another example of the cool weather coming into the Midwest, bouncing off the high pressure, and then basically causing a lot more rain in the eastern U.S. than it did here in the Midwest at this point. So that's part of the situation here, and also because of the uncertainty here of how the USDA is going to be able to count and get various ideas about the yields has caused a lot of people to be cautious here going into next week's numbers here. We have some numbers to look at, and we'll look at those shortly. But it's interesting how the trade's been a little bit on the cautious order, and that's not an unusual situation this time of year.
Yeah, so you are expecting a further reduce on corn yields. I can say mostly compared to soybeans, there will be a greater reduction in corn yields compared to soy.
Yes, well, basically you're talking about a crop that one is looking at a yield around 173 to 175 bushels, while beans are looking at 50 to 51 bushels an acre. So that's part of the reason the absolute differences are a little different here. The scenario here, we've had quite a few, estimates from commercial entities and various people in the industry that are big brokerage firms, things like that. It's been kind of interesting, which is not totally surprising. The bigger commercial firms are very cautious about projecting a big reduction in yield, while a couple different private estimates are down closer to 171 on corn and maybe closer to 50 bushels on beans. From there, actually, the average that came out from the Reuters came out to be on corn 173.5, actually very similar to my number 173.6 on corn. There's been a lot of different theories here about potentially a big potential increase in corn acreages because of the past history of the FSA planning data that came out in August. I guess someone from the USDA kind of cautioned people to say, well, don't look at the past history. We're doing a better job of getting these data in here. And I definitely am very cautious about much change there. Soybean side of things, another interesting story there from the standpoint that the trade situation on soybeans was also down. I think it was down to 50.2 from 50.9. I'm looking at 50.1 on the trade expectations here. I don't know that it's an interesting situation because I'm also cautious that we could end up having minimal changes in these yields, and the USDA just punts and waits to the next month on these things, and so that's the tricky thing on here. But I think the interesting scenario is that we are just starting to get some early yields in. Of course, usually early yields around the Midwest tend to be crops that have had a quick maturity, drought issues, other problems along the way. So they tend to be a little less than in their regions versus things that have a chance to mature to other later in the season. The twist of it is that I think some of these yields that were coming in were from planted stuff in April, and things that are planted in May this year might have been able to get through that June dryness a little bit better, but we'll just have to see on that as to what comes out of it. But the interesting factor on the things is that in the corn side of things, we're talking about taking down about 140 million bushels of production, and in the bean side, we're looking at 55 million on my estimates here. And on the bean side, that is a very interesting twist there from the standpoint that we had 245 million last month from the USDA's carryover stock because they moved it down to 50.9 on yield. Now, there is, and I kind of feel like there could be as much as 150, 200,000 more acres being planted. That's some in the Midwest, some in the Delta, and that on double crop beans after wheat. And so our yields are not going to end up being dramatically different. Sometimes even the double crop beans even don't have as high a yield because of the timing they have in the season, or particularly in some northern areas like Indiana, and that and they are vulnerable to freeze, things like that. But it's hard to talk about freeze these days when we just had two big bouts of heat here in the Midwest over the last 10 to 20 days.
Now, the upside of this is that you are seeing a similar demand. You are not changing the demand.
No, on the bean side, I think that the USDA's numbers are on target. I don't sense that they're going to change them much at this point. Of course, how things start to develop in South America here on how their season gets off to here at this point. The wheat crop in Argentina looked pretty puny here before the Labor Day holiday, but there was a very excellent rain event that came through parts of Cordoba, southern Santa Fe, and in the northern parts of Argentina, and that saved that. I don't know that there's we've saved the complete wheat crop down there, and at the same time, the rain activity in Brazil and down there, Rio Grande and Paraná, I think, are improved from where they were over the winter. But right now, at least, normally you get the Mato Grosso and Goiás is where we start to get plantings going down there. I am not sure that we've seen much change there, and that could be interesting. The South America's new crops ideas are going to be highly important going through the fall here. But I think the one thing that still haunts this market, that we still have lots of supply of some beans that's still in Brazil, and also additional corn that will be moving down. So that's the one thing that's usually by the time we get to say the second week in October here, we're starting to really crank up our exports here in the U.S., and that might be a little delayed this year. It seems that way, at least. But the one twist we've continued to have over they'll say the last 6, 8, 9 weeks, could be even and that has been China's been a participant. They were in again today buying some beans here, and that's so they're getting in a position to buy and move some soybeans later this fall on the U.S. Side of the ledger here. So that's still at least there is some demand out there. I'd have to say, though, corn and wheat have been pretty puny here, considering the issues around the world here at this point. Ukraine is really not getting a chance to get much exports out. I know they're working hard, looking at all different alternatives out there, and after the Black Sea corridor kind of collapsed, but it's going to be a battle for them to get stuff out, and that's what the Russians want. They don't want dollars going in the Ukrainian coffers here to continue to keep the fight up. But hopefully they can find enough that, and the West can continue to give them support, because they deserve to have their country.
All right. What about next week? What do you expect?
Well, next week is going to be interesting. I kind of feel like we've kind of put lots of cautions in here, and I think we'll get back to looking at excuse me, U.S. yield results. I think also what I just mentioned about South America there. You also, when we were talking earlier here, you were mentioning about shipments on the U.S. side of things being impacted by the low Mississippi River situation, and that's still going to be a problem for us in the U.S. Because right now the draft situation has run from about 12 foot down to 9 foot, and it's taken 25% out of the barges that are going south. So that means that there won't be as many supplies out there where you have to get more and more barges to go down there. And there's definitely plenty of barges around right now to do shipments. It's just that it's a little more costly. But I'd have to say that next week, first we'll be looking at the crop numbers there from USDA and how that, to my point of view, I think if we stay at the current expectations here of looking at yields down bushel and a half or so in corn and 8 or 9% or tenths of a bushel in beans, I think they'll be well in the market, and I think they'll be looking out at other things around the world and what's going on here in our harvest and that. But unfortunately, that could suggest we could be moving along at a slow pace here until we get further into the harvest and getting more and more yield ideas and things like that. But there are the first signs of the 2023 U.S. harvest is starting to show up on social media, and we'll keep an eye on that going forward.
All right. Thank you very much.
Have a good weekend. We'll talk next week.